Hi, very good morning. I am Dr. Janak Patel, MD, General Physician. All my video lectures are mainly for educative purpose. Today we'll be discussing on again one of the very interesting topic, that is neurological examination. This lecture will be mainly first introductory part of neurological examination, and then we'll be going to different parts how you examine the CNS. This will be very helpful to you in your everyday practice, as well as it will be very useful to also in your oral exams, and some of the thing can be asked in your theory also. So neurological examination, we always say that you can see a lot just by observing. So even before you start taking a history, if you just observe the patient, what is the condition, in which position he is lying down, where he was found, etc., gives you good answer. Even when he is coming to your hospital or when he is entering in your clinic, even that observation, the gait, what is the position, the way in which he is standing, all that gives you good idea. And it's always very clear that you will be able to see only what you know. Means if you don't know what finding you come across in which disease, even if they are present in that patient, just by observation also, you will not be able to identify. Say you don't know what is Bell's palsy. Even if the person has got Bell's palsy, when you see from distance, you can easily identify. But if you don't know what is Bell's palsy, you will not be able to identify. That's why you can see only what you know. So that is absolutely necessary. So neurological examination needs observation. It also includes what we call as complete CNS examination. Even there is something called as auscultation also. We'll be discussing when we come to that part. And there is a very clear thing in CNS. Say here, just by observing, you can make out that this is hydrocephalus. This is herpes zoster. This is classical Bell's palsy. So maximum number of time you see more and more number of patient, you will be able to identify good number of time by just observation also. So practice, practice and practice, that makes man perfect. There are good number of books which are being published. Now if you want to become a good neurologist, if you understand what is neurology and what are the different function of different parts, you will be able to almost do as close to as a neurologist. There are a lot of instruments, but if you don't know which instrument to use where and how to use, for what purpose to use, it will be very difficult. But in CNS examination, Snellen's chart, pin, tuning fork, tongue depressor, hammer, stick with a cotton, ophthalmoscope is absolutely necessary. So you will require all this instrument, including even stethoscope also is required. So pen light, tongue blade, cotton swab, cotton ball, tuning fork, percussion hammer, all these are necessary for CNS examination. And in tuning fork, there are different frequency, 128, 256 and 512. These are three frequency which are commonly being utilized. So common instruments, ophthalmoscope, otoscope, trunk depressor, tuning fork, pin, tape measurement, flashlight, reflex hammer, cotton whips, and small container having different material for testing olfactory nerve, quite common. that is like salt, pepper, coffee powder, soap, lime, etc. And even the tube which is having a warm water and cold water. So stethoscope, tuning fork, hammer, percussing hammer, nasal speculum, sphygmomanometer, otoscope, ophthalmoscope, all these are necessary instruments while doing a examination. You can have even esthesiometer to do a sensory system examination and compass esthesiometer to do 2-point discrimination. This is for 2-point discrimination. This is for vibration sensation as well as for Raynaud's test and Weber's test. This is key, coin, etc. That is for stereognosis. While for crude touch, cotton wick. Blunt end of the pencil for pressure, or even you can utilize your keychain, key. Hot and cold water for temperature sensation. Then pin for pain in case of sensory system examination. There is always a board at a railway crossing. Stop, look and listen, otherwise you will meet with an accident. Same thing is with CNS also. Always stop for a while, observe and listen to the patient properly when he is giving a good history. Almost good number of conditions are easily diagnosed by observation and listening to the person regarding his complaint, etc. So history comes first, examination is next, and then you go for scanning purpose. So you can see a lot by just observing. You can see only what you know is absolutely true for neurological examination. This already I have discussed in the introductory part of CNS, that is different division, central nervous system, that is brain and spinal cord, peripheral nervous system consisting of 12 pairs of cranial nerves and 31 pairs of spinal nerves, and that peripheral nervous system you can divide into somatic and autonomic. Somatic means cranial nerves and spinal nerves, while autonomic nervous system is sympathetic and parasympathetic. I will skip all these slides. This already we have discussed in past. This is again same. At your leisure time you can go through. Now there are neurological disease we can divide into different groups depending upon the pathophysiology, like infection, which can be viral, bacterial, fungal, tubercular, parasitic, traumatic injury, which can be concussion, contusion, laceration. Now we always use the word traumatic brain injury. Tumor can be benign or can be malignant. Malignant can be primary and secondary. Vascular pathophysiology can be thrombosis, embolism or hemorrhage. There can be certain degenerative disorders, congenital defects or genetic disorders, immune mediated disorders, nutritional deficiency which can be because of excess of nutrition we call toxic effect, and it can be also because of deficiency of some substances. You can be having a disorders because of toxic effect of drugs, chemicals, etc. Or it can be created during a procedures like iatrogenic. Classical example, wrist drop while giving an injection intramuscular in deltoid region, you inject into a radial nerve and produce wrist drop or radial nerve palsy. And when you can't identify a cause, we label that as idiopathic. So these are all different types of neurological disorders you will come across, and you have to identify them by good history, observation and examination, and then followed by investigations. So main aim is to confirm the CNS lesion, locate the site of the damage, and that can be done by good history, physical examination, CNS examination followed by investigations. In CNS examination, it is complete CNS examination, peripheral nervous system and autonomic nervous system examination. And as far as motor system is concerned, you should be able to differentiate between upper motor neuron, lower motor neuron. And by history, physical examination and good examination, intracranial or extracranial disorders. You have to find out the cause of damage, and for finding out the cause of damage, after a good examination, it should be followed by investigations. And in that etiology, we should be able to differentiate whether it is infective, traumatic, tumor, vascular, degenerative, demyelinating, nutritional disorders, toxic disorders, or drug-induced, etc. And after making a proper diagnosis, management can be planned out depending upon the diagnosis and investigations. And then you can also know the prognosis of that disease and what will be the morbidity and mortality. All this can be identified once you make a complete thorough diagnosis. So good history, which will include symptoms, past history, personal history, family history, drugs, etc. Then go for vital data, which will include pulse, blood pressure, respiration, and temperature. Then general examination, and then we follow by neurological examination. And then, if required, cardiovascular, respiratory, etc. Depending upon the probable diagnosis, you will be going for investigations. Now, CNS examination will depend on unconscious patient, conscious patient. Because there will be gross difference between examination in a conscious, fully conscious patient and unconscious patient. Also in a non-cooperative person, person with a psychiatric disorders, children, neonates, newborn, because they cannot give you a good history and they will not cooperate in your examination. And also the neurological examination will differ in person with severe arthritis, gross bony deformities, congenital malformations. All this will interfere with your good CNS examination. While taking a history, you can get a good clinical history from a patient himself. And while taking a history regarding symptom, signs, origin, duration, progress, family history, past history, personal history, and history of drugs, vital data, general examination, CNS followed by CVS, RS, elementary system, and any other examination required. Then investigations. But in a person, you will obtain the history from relatives, friends, or even from the previous doctor, etc. Particularly in the person who is unconscious, altered mental status, psychiatric individual, or person who has got psychiatric disorders, children, newborns, a person who has got aphasia or aphonia, dysarthria, where you cannot understand what he wants to explain you, deaf and dumb person, person who has got dementia or mentally retarded person. In all this group of people, you will require to get an history from relative and friends. We already mentioned history, examination, and investigations. For confirmation of etiology, investigation should be done for localization, for diagnosis, and once you confirm the diagnosis, it will help you in management and it will help you to find out the prognosis as well as morbidity and mortality. This all is necessary. And while taking a performer, you will get name, age, sex, education, occupation, address, information, and whether he is right hand or left handed. All this will be helpful to you. By and large, we divide the disorders of CNS into few groups, and that gives you a little idea also. Say like acute onset will be very frequently because of trauma, vascular or infection. Again in vascular, embolic and intracranial hemorrhage and subarachnoid hemorrhage. While infection will be more acute because of bacterial and viral. If it is gradual onset or chronic onset or slow onset, gradually progressive will be very common in tumor, thrombosis, infection like tuberculosis, parasitic and fungal infections. If there is a recurrent episodes, more in favor of vascular, some infections and occasionally in case of tumor. If it is very chronic, say person is complaining to you since last 5 years, 10 years, and does not fit with any particular picture, then it is more in favor of psychogenic, or we call hysterical. It is also very important whether it is crossed or uncrossed. We call ipsilateral or contralateral, because it will tell you where is the damage. Because if it is ipsilateral finding, it is more below the medulla as far as motor system is concerned. If it is contralateral, it is more in favor of inner brainstem and above. Whether it is cruciate, whether there is hemiplegia, hemiparesis, dense. If it is dense, it is more in internal capsule lesion. If the person has got brachial hemiplegia, upper limb more involved as compared to lower limb, or crucial hemiplegia, all these things becomes very, very useful. Cross hemiplegia will be in a brainstem. All these findings will be very useful. We'll be discussing, while all these parts will be discussing in a person when we go to a localization of lesion in a motor system. Now, particularly when you want to find out that it is intracranial or extracranial, this slide will be very helpful. So, person in whom you get these symptoms and signs, this will tell you intracranial, like headache, seizures, aphasia, aphonia, aura or hallucination, hemiplegia, hemianopia, hemianesthesia, altered level of consciousness or unconscious, drowsy, stupor or deep coma, diplopia, nystagmus. All this suggests there is a damage to either cerebral hemisphere or brainstem or cerebellum. This is definitely in favor of intracranial pathology, and similar way you will get these symptoms and signs. So whenever you get such symptoms and signs, it will be more in favor of intracranial. And for intracranial, X-ray skull, epilateral, paranasal sinus, basal fractured skull for ruling out basal fracture, CT or spiral CT or MRI, or combining with contrast or with angio. That will be very, very useful for finding out intracranial damage. CSF examination, we have already done in CSF analysis, will be very useful in hemorrhage and infections. Ventriculography, echoencephalography, burr hole and biopsy, aspiration, EEG, functional EEG, video EEG, all this will be useful in a person who has got intracranial damage, plus other investigations. And in a case of an extracranial damage, means damage outside the skull, that is mainly spinal cord and peripheral nerves. This will be identified by person having paresthesia, local anesthesia, trophic ulcer, wrist drop, fruit drops, which are of lower motor neuron type, then neuralgia, paraplegia, quadriplegia, neurogenic bladder, etc. This will tell you that it is a damage to spinal cord or peripheral nerves. And in that particular conditions, you will be going for finding out whether what type of spinal cord injury is there. And on examination, you will be looking mainly for sensory and tendon reflexes. You will be looking for sensory findings, motor findings, whether it is upper motor neuron, lower motor neuron, which side, etc. Whether it is because of partial damage or transection, it is acute or chronic, all this will be absolutely necessary. And that we call as localization, we'll be doing in when we go for localization. And as far as investigation is concerned, spine X-ray epilateral will be very useful. MRI or CT for spine, myelography, EMG, nerve conduction study, nerve biopsy, skin biopsy, etc. will be absolutely necessary. And this is absolutely important while finding out extracranial pathophysiology. Now, as we come to CNS examination, there are a lot of things which are being required for CNS examination. But CNS examination will be done if any person who comes to with headache, seizures, altered level of consciousness, sensory symptoms and signs, speech disturbances like aphonia, aphasia, memory disturbances, motor system findings like upper motor neuron, lower motor neuron, ataxia, vertigo, incoordination, diplopia, dysphagia, ptosis, visual disturbances like hemianopia, quadrantic hemianopia, blurred vision, etc., tremors, involuntary movements. These are multiple symptoms and signs, and this is a big list. You can go through. This is one list, this is another list. All these symptoms suggest that there is a neurological symptoms and signs. You will go for CNS examination and try to differentiate whether it is intracranial, extracranial, etc. So some complaint, say one simple complaint in a pain, we always go for the history, location, quality, severity, duration, precipitating factor, associated symptoms, aggravating factor, relieving factor, etc. All this will give you an idea. Where is the pain? What is the structure which is been involved, which is giving rise to pain? And all those findings will be given. And this is the one of the chart which will give you an idea regarding the severity of pain. So you can utilize all this. Say a person comes to you with seizures, then onset, duration, activity, preceded by, associated symptoms, any injury, prior history, last episode, post recovery phase, whether there is spontaneous recovery, any medication person is taking, all this will be very useful while taking history in person who has got seizures. And by that particular good history, you will be able to differentiate even whether it is syncope or seizures. This we have already discussed in a chapter of syncope as well as in a chapter of seizures. You can go through at your leisure time. Say person comes to you with vertigo, you will try to take a good history and find out whether it is vertigo, whether it is dizziness, whether it is syncope, what it is. So it becomes very, very useful. Then any person who has got disturbances in thinking, memory and personality, that will help you to identify what type of disorders he is having. Person with nausea, vomiting will also be helpful because in CNS person will usually have a projectile vomiting. Then present history, past history, all those are important. A good history, social history, history of drugs, family history of diabetes, tuberculosis, epilepsy, asthma, etc. is also useful. Then also photophobia, phonophobia, confusions, irritability, restlessness, neck rigidity, all this you can identify also, and even a person will give you in a history. In general examination, pallor, cyanosis, edema, lymph node, spinal deformity, skin rash, nerve examination, whether it is thickened. If it is thickened, more in favor of leprosy. Skin rash will be very commonly seen in SLE, tuberous sclerosis, leprosy, lepra reaction. You will have a skin manifestation. Spinal deformity will be, if you get scoliosis, it is very common in dystrophy. Lymph nodes, lymphoma can involve CNS. Edema can be because of hypoproteinemia. Cyanosis, you can have hypoxic damage to brain. Pallor will be seen in anemia, and anemia will be very common in beriberi, subacute combined degeneration, and you can have even peripheral neuropathy. These are some of the highlights. Vital data, pulse, cardiac arrhythmia can produce syncope, hypoxia, thromboembolism. Hypertension can produce encephalopathy, intracranial hemorrhage, subarachnoid hemorrhage, can also have a occipital headache. Hypotension can end with syncope, coma. Hypotension can end with syncope, and even very severe enough can be, person can be in altered level of consciousness and even in coma. And hypertension can also produce two other group of disorders we call as a PRES, that is posterior reversible encephalopathy syndrome, and CRVS, PRES, and RCVS, reversible cerebral vasoconstriction syndrome. These are the groups of hypertensive complications. In respiration, if the person has got Kussmaul's breathing, Barrett's breathing, Cheyne-Stokes breathing, it suggests brainstem damage. And also a person who has got hypoxia, and who has got respiratory distress will be producing brain damage also. Very high temperature, that is hyperpyrexia, hypothermia, can also produce brain damage. And fever will be very common in infective pathophysiology and also in case of inflammatory pathophysiology. Hypothermia can also produce damage to the brain. So temperature can be elevated in head trauma, infection, thyrotoxicosis, carcinoma. Myxedema, the temperature will be lower. Hypothermia, temperature will be lower. And in severe shock also, temperature will be low. Pulse, bradycardia is indicative of raised intracranial pressure because it is one of the signs in case of Cushing tract. Respiration, we already mentioned, ataxic breathing, Cheyne-Stokes breathing, Byrd's breathing, quite common in a person with a brainstem damage. Diabetic ketoacidosis will produce classical, we call as a Kussmaul's breathing, that is hyperapnea with tachypnea, and that will also produce altered level of consciousness because of effect on brain. Blood pressure, yes, always important because it can produce hypertensive complication or hypotensive and shock complication. Pupillary examination is very helpful. We'll be discussing in a third cranial nerve and separately in a pupillary examination. So always look at the, we call pupil size, equal or not, round or not, reactive to light and accommodation. So short form it is called PERRLA. P for pupil, equal, round, reacting to light and accommodation. So that is done in a pupillary examination. So you look for that. You look at the cornea. You can see here, this is a golden yellow color which will be very commonly seen in Kesher-Fleischer ring in Wilson disease. Then look for external eye structure, position, whether there is a squint. You can see here there is a squint. This is classical exophthalmos. So look for all those findings, strabismus, exophthalmos, deviation, eyelids, sunset sign, all those are important. There can be even ptosis, unequal pupil, dilated pupil, constricted pupil, all those will be important. We'll be discussing all these things in cranial nerve examination. So pupillary examination will be very helpful. Anisocoria, nystagmus, dilated pupil, fixed pupil, pinpoint pupil, all those gives you important clue. This is just a highlight chapter. Even the movement of the eyeball we'll be discussing in third, fourth and sixth cranial nerve palsy. Look at the cornea, sclera for jaundice, cyanosis, pallor. Then fundus examination is absolutely necessary. We should learn regarding how to do fundus examination and look at the fundus part. It gives you a lot of idea regarding a CNS examination. Even a nasal examination will be very helpful prior to doing olfactory nerve examination, and also if there is a CSF discharge in case of basal fracture skull, if there is a bleeding ENT again in basal fracture skull, and if there is a nasal pathophysiology which can be responsible for even meningitis. So that will be one of the part of nasal examination. Otoscopic examination will be also helpful prior to doing a eighth cranial nerve examination, and also it will be helpful to find out CSF otorrhea, bleeding, discharge, eardrum pathophysiology, otitis media, etc. Because otitis media can give rise to even meningitis. Spread of infection from local site, particularly from frontal sinusitis and from otitis media into intracranial structure. So otoscopic and nasal examination becomes very useful. So we have already mentioned these particular things. Then in general, right from head till toe, you should examine vital data, skin, ear, nose, throat, respiratory, cardiovascular, GI tract should be also examined. Skin examination, sometimes it gives you a good idea. Some of the things are given here. Herpes zoster, this can end up with post-herpetic neuralgia, and during herpes, it will give rise to a severe pain. Herpes simplex will also be pathological, and that can also produce a damage to brain. Scleroderma can also induce vascular pathophysiology and give rise to CNS damage. Then you can have a hereditary sensory neuropathy, syringomyelia, then dermatographia. All this little idea, you can have advantage. So skin examination becomes very useful. Nail examination also sometimes it becomes useful. So all this should be done. Koilonychia, clubbing, paronychia, then shapes, angle, color, capillary refilling time, all these minor things. Look for tourniquet test that will produce bleeding, then ear, nose, throat examination, head and face examination. Sometimes good number of disease can be identified like microcephaly, acromegaly, hydrocephalus. This you can identify very nicely, Paget disease. Then person wearing glasses, wearing earphones, etc. will be also helpful. Then certain peculiar phase, Parkinson phase, myxedema phase, hyperthyroid phase, Cushing syndrome, all those you can identify. Bell's palsy, facial atrophy, ocular myopathy, ptosis, all this can be easily identifiable. Altered mental status, coma, then person with abnormal eye position, eye deviation, then this is called battle sign, hematoma. You will have hemorrhage around the mastoid process. This will be raccoon eye if you get hematoma around this. You can see this will be battle sign around the mastoid process behind the ear pinna. And in that you will be asking for specific X-ray we call basal fracture skull. Specific X-ray you will be asking for basal skull fractures. This is called raccoon eye, or we call black eye, periorbital bruising. In raccoon eye, you will be asking for again basal fracture skull. This is raccoon eye, very classical. And in that particular, quite common, you will have CSF rhinorrhea. And in basal fracture skull, you can have CSF otorrhea. You can see a water drop. This is CSF. And here you will have a CSF otorrhea. Rhinorrhea. This will be rhinorrhea. This will be otorrhea. Then you can look for scoliosis, kyphoscoliosis, lordosis. Lordosis will be quite common in muscular dystrophy. Scoliosis will be also very common in muscular dystrophy. Kyphoscoliosis will be common with, and that can end up with paraplegia. Gibbous deformity will be quite common with spinal tuberculosis, or we call pot spine. So scoliosis, kyphoscoliosis, gibbous is quite common with pot spine. So all these are minor things. They are very important. You can look for flapping tremors. Flapping tremors will be very common in case of a hepatic encephalopathy, uremia, carbon dioxide narcosis. These three conditions quite common. So look for those findings. And you can ask the relative of the person to describe what exactly has happened. The relative, a person who has seen that particular, he will be able to describe very nicely. And good number of time you can identify what disease the children is suffering, because children will not be able to give that description. A relative will be able to give the description. And you just by observing a seizures activity, you can find out that it's an intracranial pathophysiology. Then you can observe for whether it is focal or generalized. You can identify altered level of consciousness. These are all showing you Japanese encephalitis picture. Then you can look for doll's eye movements. which will give you an idea regarding a brainstem damage or not. We call oculocephalic reflexes. Opisthotonus can be easily identified. Extensor posture because of the what we call as decerebrate posture. Then local signs in case of a focal brain damage. Neck rigidity, Kernick sign, Brudzinski sign, quite important in case of a subarachnoid hemorrhage, intracranial hemorrhage, meningitis, meningism, etc. These are the three signs very commonly detectable in children. And in adult, Kernick sign and Brudzinski sign is little difficult. But in children, all the three signs can be easily demonstrable. In adult, you can demonstrate neck stiffness, but Kernick and Brudzinski sign will be very, very difficult to demonstrate. So you can demonstrate all these three signs, quite characteristic in subarachnoid hemorrhage, good number of time in case of intracranial hemorrhage and with meningitis, maybe bacterial, viral or even encephalitis. Also in case of meningism. Here you are demonstrating neck stiffness. Again, neck stiffness in children can be easily demonstrable. Brudzinski sign means when you flex at the neck, there will be flexion at hip and knee. That is Brudzinski. And in Kernick, flex at hip, flex at knee and extend at knee, there will be spasm of the muscle and person will complain of pain. That is Kernick sign. So Kernick and Brudzinski sign very, very important. Then look for Cushing triad, which is a elevation of systolic pressure, wide pulse pressure, bradycardia and bradypnea. Typical Cushing triad suggests of raised intracranial pressure and almost the person is going for grade what we call stage 4, stage 3 and 4. Then if a person is having a flex posture or person acquires a flex posture on pressure or pain, that is characteristic of a decorticate posture, and decerebrate posture there will be extensor which indicates decerebrate posture. And when you press and all four limbs are flaccid, it indicates almost very bad damage to lower part of medulla. That will be typical. In case of CNS examination, we go for higher function followed by cranial nerve examination right from first cranial nerve to 12th cranial nerve. Motor system examination, sensory system examination, reflexes which will include superficial reflex, deep tendon reflex, posture, gait, equilibrium, look for involuntary movement, coordination, cerebellar examination. All this you can do in case of a fully conscious patient. But examination will change in all this if person is unconscious. By and large, autonomic nervous system is very rarely done, but in some condition, particularly say diabetic person, autonomic nervous system examination will be helpful and it requires a specific setup. Don't forget to examine the spine to look at the deformity like scoliosis, kyphoscoliosis, gibbus. Don't forget to examine the skull, particularly in children, which will help you to pick up microcephaly, hydrocephalus, certain other deformities, etc. And also don't forget to examine the meningeal sign, that is neck rigidity, Kernick sign and Brudzinski sign. All these are absolutely necessary. And always differentiate between upper motor neuron and lower motor neuron. This already we have mentioned in previous lecture, introductory lecture, that is there will be few terms: dorsal, ventral, anterior, posterior, superior, inferior, lateral, medial. All these are some of the terms. You must be aware of all these terms. Have a pause, go through them. Proximal, distal, ipsilateral, contralateral, coronal, sagittal, horizontal. All these are the terms which will be very, very frequently utilized in CNS. Palsy, paresis, plagia, hemiplegia, hemiparesis, paraplegia, quadriplegia, all these terms will be utilized. Atrophy, hypertrophy, pseudo-hypertrophy, spasticity, rigidity, flaccidity. These are some of the terms very frequently will be utilized. And we have already mentioned diagnostic evaluations. We are mentioning intracranial as well as extracranial. These are all the different investigations which we will be doing. So I'll end my lecture here regarding introductory part, how you start CNS examination, and then now we'll be going to higher function, cranial nerves, all those things. So thank you for taking out time. I know that your time is valuable and I appreciate that you have spent some of the time with me. If you like this particular lecture, please don't forget to press the button like, give your suggestions so that I can improve, I can make my lectures better. If you feel this lecture is helpful to you, you can share with your friends also. And I feel that this lecture will be helpful to you in your everyday practice, in your oral exam also, and sometimes some of the things can be asked also in theory. So I end my lecture here. See you in next lecture.